You are listening to Women's Running Stories, where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
Standing at a start line, knowing you're fit enough to accomplish something, but that something might get in the way of that is the exact same thing as having a job at a company and having a goal for, the quarter or the year, and then something surprising happens and you have to stay goal oriented and performance oriented, but you also have to maintain flexibility. Otherwise, there's no chance that you'll do your best. You have to be able to replan on the fly in sport and life and business, and there's so many parallels. I'm Arielle Knutson, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I am a dog mom, and I'm a runner.
Yes, this episode features Arielle Knutson, who is a dog mom and a runner, and she is also the CEO of the much-loved women's running apparel brand, Oiselle. And she is here to share how being an athlete has shaped her life, and how her passions and pursuits in business and in sport are very thoughtfully intertwined. But before you hear more from Arielle, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. Thank you so much for being here. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast. And I hope you are listening and out on a run, or I don't know, maybe you're cleaning your house, or you're sitting relaxing with a cup of tea. Maybe you're running errands in your car. But whatever you are doing, thanks for being here, and get ready to be inspired. And right up top here, I do want to thank Morgan for putting me in touch with Arielle, so thank you, Morgan. So let's get into Arielle's story. Arielle is going to share her running and athlete journey and how she came to appreciate the overlap between sports and career as she came into her adult years. She's going to get into all of it. On the athlete front, Arielle likes to go all in. She has completed several marathons, Ironman races, and trail ultras. And clearly she goes all in career life too. And she's going to share what becoming a CEO was like for her. There are a couple of details I want to clarify before we get started here. They have to do with triathlon. Arielle mentions the Olympic distance triathlon, and that is comprised of a 1.5 kilometer swim, 40K bike, and a 10K run. That roughly translates to a 1 mile swim, 25 mile bike, and just over 6 mile run. She also mentions the Ironman distance triathlon, and just for a refresher on that one, that is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a 26.2 mile run, the length of a standard marathon. In kilometers, that translates to a 3.9 kilometer swim, 180.2 kilometer bike, and a 42.2 kilometer run. Any way you describe it, the Ironman is very long. And now we are ready to get started. And so here, to tell her story, starting at the beginning of her athletic journey, is Arielle Knutson.
So growing up, I was an athlete. I was not a runner at the time, though. Growing up, I was just extremely active. I loved playing outside, climbing trees. Some of my earliest memories are like climbing on counters or up the refrigerator. And so I think very early on, my parents decided I needed to play sports, and they enrolled me in gymnastics. And so being a gymnast was just part of the core of who I was from before I can remember up through, childhood years, teenage years, and even once I left the sport, still has just been a core part of who I am. Growing up, I did gymnastics about 15 to 20 hours a week on top of normal public school, which sounds crazy, but is very standard for the sport. And being competitive at that sport just requires a lot of time, a lot of persistence, hard work, determination, and all of those things I think really helped shape me into who I am today. Growing up, at the same time, I never really knew what my end goal with any of it was. I think at the time I probably would have said that I just love feeling strong. I love being a part of a team. I probably would have said I wanted to compete in college and get some sort of scholarship. But looking back, it wasn't actually the competition part of sport that really spoke to me. It was the hard work day in and day out and having a million little micro goals that you could always be working toward. So whether it was doing, more conditioning at home or throwing a new trick on the uneven bars, something about setting goals on a day-to-day basis and working toward their goals just became intrinsically part of how I function in the world and who I was and who I am today. So as I moved on from gymnastics into other activities in adulthood, like running, which I picked up in my mid 20s, I think I've always felt most like myself when I have an outlet for that goal setting and that achievement. And, the achievement hasn't always been big wins, but to feel like I've accomplished what I set out to accomplish. No way. I remember one day it must have been early 2009, my now sister-in-law decided that she was going to run the Rock and Roll Half Marathon in Seattle. And I think she'd run a few half marathons before. It wasn't something that was like completely foreign and new to her. She was newer to Seattle and wanted to, be part of the running community here. And so she asked me, knowing that I, at the time, was a gym goer, I was athletic and fitness focused, but certainly not a runner. She asked if I would do it with her. And I think I probably laughed or was like, absolutely not. And she was like, come on, why not? And eventually convinced me that I needed to run this half marathon with her. And at the time, I'd probably only ever run a couple of miles at a time. I really didn't necessarily even like running. I believed that I didn't like running, which was why I was so against the idea initially. But my goal setting and achievement focused mind kicked in, and I said, okay, sure, I'll do this thing with you, and was just immediately overcome with okay, what gear do I need? What training plan do I follow? What do I need to do every single day so that I survive this experience? And through the training, it was interesting because I hadn't had the same kind of organized outlet as I had through my youth training for gymnastics with a team. But having this goal that, I thought I could achieve it, but I didn't really know because I'd never done anything like it before. And having a plan to follow, I just kind of fell in love with the process again. So I ended up running that half marathon. And I don't know that I really enjoyed the race itself as much as I enjoyed training for it and having those goals along the way. And so I think pretty immediately after I finished, I thought, well, you know what? Everyone is supposed to want to run a full marathon too, right? I guess I should just do that now because I'm halfway there. Not now, immediately after, but I found a marathon to run, I think 6 months later or 5 months later, so that I could just continue my training. And I think that's when I really fell in love with running as a sport, was through that process of training and just seeing how gratifying it could be to set all of these goals and feel the momentum of accomplishment on a day-to-day basis. When I started running, I didn't know much about the sport or how to get better or even where do people go to do this sport? It had never crossed my mind. Where do runners run? I don't know. So as all of us runners do, you go to social media, you hit the internet and you try to start figuring out, okay, how can I find routes and which shoes are the best? And being new to something, as an adult is very different than being new to it when you have structures in place that are intended to support you. You know, starting running as a middle schooler or a high schooler where there's a school team and some education around it is different than when you're in your 20s and you are like ready to go, but you don't really know where to start. And so I started looking at different brands and communities online and in real life. And I'm lucky to have a wonderful running community here in Seattle that over time I became integrated into. But one of the first things that I found, especially being an introvert sometimes, which I am, I'm an introvert, sometimes that in real life experience can feel really scary as a first step. So through the powers of social media, I found Oiselle. And Oiselle is a brand. I now work there, and I'm so lucky to do that. But I, at the time, found Oiselle as a women's performance running apparel brand that was also very focused on this community aspect. And so they were assembling a team of everyday athletes to represent the brand. And there were certainly in real life components being a Seattle based brand, but there was also a lot of digital support. So, you know, a lot of the runners would follow each other on social media platforms at the time and give advice on, you know, the best races to run during the fall season or whatever advice you were looking for. And so having that cultivated and kind of curated community was something that was really appealing to me to help me navigate, like, how should I be doing this? So I joined Oiselle's racing team. That's what it was called at the time. And there were probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 other women that were a part of it. It was Oiselle's early days as well as my running early days. But it was a really great experience to like catapult me into this sport that would ultimately be life-changing. And it's you know, that was back in 2011 or 2012 that I joined their team. And at the time I met a group of women who were my running friends, and now they are my everything friends. We certainly still run together, but we also have celebrated life milestones and life changes and just life along the way. And it's cool to have shared so many running miles, but also just miles in general altogether. When I started running, I got all in really quickly. As I mentioned, a half marathon straight to a marathon. And I think some of what roped me in early was just that continuous improvement that you often see when you're a beginner at something that's really, really gratifying. You know, you start learning about it, you start applying, you know, learning best practices, routine, just consistency, and you see improvements really rapidly for, you know, a good amount of time. So when I ran my first marathon, I learned shortly after crossing the finish line that I'd just missed a Boston qualification by a handful of minutes. And so I thought, well, that's what I'll do next. Of course, I'll just go qualify, which, you know, wasn't as easy to shave off a few minutes as I thought it would be. But that goal kept me going to run another marathon and just see how much better I could do. I did eventually qualify for Boston and was able to run Boston a couple of times, but going all in on running so quickly without some preparedness did leave me with some injuries early on. And so I discovered triathlon through cross training, and my actually stepped away from running as my like primary sport for about 10 years to race triathlon, because I found that the swimming and the biking, in addition to the running, left my body feeling healthier and stronger in a lot of ways, and kind of similar to my running mentality. Once I was in and had goals, I was just very focused on how do I improve, how do I get closer to those goals. So it's funny, I haven't actually reflected on this until now, but my foray into triathlon was kind of similar to running in that I did one Olympic distance triathlon and then registered for an Ironman next. So, you know, just going to show, I guess, that once I got started and had an understanding of the sport and what it looked like and whether I liked the training or not, because that's the most important part to me is the everyday. I thought, I want to set a big goal and I want to see if I could do it. And 9 Ironmans later, it turns out that yes, I can complete a full Ironman relatively well most of the time. But the nature of triathlon, the community is very similar to running in a lot of ways, but the gear is complex. The races, there aren't as many races to participate in, and so it's even more all consuming in a lot of ways, or I found it to be. So while I loved the sport, a lot of my involvement in triathlon was more a way to keep me healthy and active so that I could run versus truly really being all in on triathlon for a lifetime. So once here and there throughout that decade, and then once I got a little bit tired of spending that amount of time on my bike, I found myself running again. And I think that all of those years of cross training really helped build up strength and durability for me. And since then, I've had a much healthier and smoother just return to running, and have had the ability to maintain higher mileage and more successful running than I did a decade earlier. So I'm still trying to technically get faster as a master, but I'm close. I'd always primarily been a road runner. I never raced cross country or track, but as I made my return to running, especially after the doing Ironman training for so long, I still did really crave those like long outdoor adventures. Like, though I got burnt out on them, there's nothing like a 8-hour bike ride through the countryside on a Saturday to like really take your mind off of life and to help you. Again, me as an introvert, like process thoughts, process life, just like see the world outside, powered by yourself. And so when I came back to running, there was some element of that I missed. And so I took to the trails and started experimenting with trail running, knowing that whether it was road running or triathlon, I was never really the fastest athlete. I took these sports up as an adult with the goal of being the best version of myself versus winning a race. But there was something about the trails that was a more similar outlet to those really long triathlon training days than road running. So I found myself on the trails quite a bit. And it doesn't hurt that during the pandemic, we adopted a dog who I have the goal of making her the best trail running companion ever. And so we together, it's been really fun, have gotten to explore a lot of trails in the Northwest and up our mileage together. I was able to complete a few ultra marathons, 50Ks, as well as a 50 miler over the last few years. And it's just such a wonderful way to be outside. When I started running on the trails, I didn't necessarily have a super specific goal in mind. It was more exploring the time on feet, exploring the outdoor adventure, kind of seeing if I liked it. And I found that I really did. Being on the trails and running is so different than the road in so many ways. I mean, your fueling, your hydration, even route planning, it's so different to be out in a trail system by yourself for 4 or 5 or 6 hours versus running on the roads. You like see people and cars, and you generally know the road system from driving in your neighborhood better than you would know a trail system than you haven't been to. So there was this like adventure and planning and wayfinding aspect that was really new to me. It was definitely scary and intimidating as well. I remember my first couple of trail runs. I planned to be out there for an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, and just the number of times I had to stop to question, is this the right way, or which way do I go, or did I go the wrong way? You don't have phone service. If you didn't download the map, you have to kind of guess. And all of that planning was a learning curve to me that, while at times frustrating because it's hard to be new at something, also made it really exciting to see, like, can I learn this? Can I do it? Will I like it once I do? And I ended up really, really enjoying it. And similar to building mileage, even just with a training plan, learning trail systems and learning how to prepare to go out there and what you need to do and how to show up for a long trail day versus, a 10-mile road run was all part of the experience to me that made it so fun. I think of my trail and ultra running endeavors, my favorite has really been the 50K, which is not that much longer than a marathon, but in miles, in distance, but the adventure contains so much more most often, because the trails are, more technical, more unexpected. The day most often takes much longer than running on roads because of the terrain. Even just the culture of trail running, where it is so fun and so much more relaxed than road running, just put a really, really different experience on racing trails than I had experienced on the road. So I guess when I follow the same patterns here in my sport endeavors, but once I ran a 50K, I thought, well, I want to try to run a 50 miler. Let's see how that goes. And for the first time ever, I crossed a finish line and said, I think I'm good. After I crossed the line of my 50 miler, which I enjoyed so much. It was beautiful. The race was incredible. There's not much that I really would have done differently, but I crossed that finish line and thought, I don't know if I need to do another one of those. And that's never happened to me before. And it's honestly been an interesting experience to feel like I'm satisfied and done. Because while I'd love to have run better or faster or what have you, so often I've been on to the next goal before I've even like really wrapped up my current goal. When I was Ironman training, it just perpetual that you were always thinking about 2 or 3 races ahead versus the race that you were about to do next week. And there was something really different and freeing about finishing the 50 miler. Like I did it, I accomplished it, I was proud of my day, and I didn't feel like I needed to go prove something else with it. I felt okay focusing on whatever I wanted to do next, which happened to be mostly more road running and then some trail fun with my dog. But that permission wasn't something that I'd often just like naturally found myself. And so that's been fun since then to not have as strict of goals outlined and to just be exploring continuous improvement, however that shows up. I know that some people are kind of all about compartmentalization of their lives in some ways. Like you have your work and your personal interests and your family and your personal friends and your work friends, and you have like all of these different compartments. And I think functioning that way has a lot of pros and supports balance in so many ways. That said, that is just not how I operate at all. When I find something that I want to do or that I love or I have a goal, I'm just like 1,000,000,000% all in. And so once I refound sport as an adult, once I found running, that feeling of sport community and being an athlete was something that I remembered how important it had always been to me. It's like it had been dormant in some way. And so I made the goal to kind of transition my career, which had been in advertising and marketing in agencies supporting lots of different brands and clients. And I really wanted to kind of merge my worlds and do that same job for a brand in the sports space. So at the time, back in 2012, I was lucky enough to find a role at a brand called Noon Hydration. They make electrolyte drink tablets for sports hydration and lots of different hydration needs. But that was my first foray as an adult, a runner, and sort of like merging all of these universes together. So I was at Noon for a decade, from the time Noon was a startup through to we sold the brand to Nestle, which an exit like that is always an interesting experience, but a goal of many small brands. And I just found that I really did my best all around in life. I was the best version of myself when I really like cared deeply about the things that I'm doing in a way that's personal to me. So that was an incredible experience to kind of play that out and see how that could work for me. And today I'm the CEO of Oiselle, which is very, very full circle since Oiselle was the brand that helped me first find running and first find running community and really kind of set me up for the adult sport journey that I've had. And it's a brand that I've just looked up to in so many ways for so long. So it's incredible to be a part of this next chapter. So in my career, in my life, I never, ever, ever thought or said to anyone, including myself, I really want to be a CEO one day. That was just never a thought that crossed my mind at all whatsoever. I knew after my experience with running and working at Noon that I really always for the rest of my career would prioritize working for brands and teams that I personally like believed in and I'm aligned with because it made my life so much better. But I never thought I never thought I'm going to be a CEO. I never thought I need to be a CEO. I definitely never thought my next dream role will be at Oiselle. And so when I got contacted by the folks who were looking to hire the CEO, I think my initial response was honestly like, I mean, I'd love to talk if you guys are actually interested. Like it was a shock to me that they were reaching out and considering me a qualified candidate for the role because it was just a thought exercise that I had truly never even remotely done. To give myself some credit in retrospect when I look back on the things that I've loved doing in my career and the things that I've been good at and the things that I've been successful at and what others have appreciated about me. It doesn't not make sense. But at the time, I just had never even remotely considered it. And so I went into all of the conversations and interviews just like with a really open learning mind, thinking, well, since I don't know if this is possible, I have kind of as much to learn about them as they do about me. And I think that mindset served me really well. The interview process was certainly scary and daunting to me, but I think even more so than that, once it felt like a fit, like once I really wanted the job, once I thought it seems like this could work, it almost became scarier then, like it kind of maybe the difference between the start line of a marathon when you're just like ready to go and mile 16 or 18 when you're like, okay, I'm in it, but I've still got a ways to go. Like now what am I going to do to get myself there? And so, just what I've always focused on through my career when I kind of like feel uncertain, I don't know what to do next, is I always try to reflect on all of the things that I've learned. So you don't go into a sport experience or a career experience knowing everything that's going to happen. A lot of it you have to figure out as you go. And if you can focus on how good you are at learning, how good you are at listening, how good you are at taking inputs and making decisions and moving forward, that's been something that has been just key to always getting me to the next step. And so once I really cared about the role in the team and really wanted this to be my opportunity, I really started focusing on that aspect. Rather than trying to say that I know things that I don't. Let's focus on how I can learn them. And honestly, even more so than the process to land here. But my first almost 2 years went went nothing like I thought they would. Not because anything crazy happened, but because just like sport is not linear, life is not linear, work is not linear. And so there's always surprises and continuing to focus on what do I need to do to get to the next mile? How will I learn this? How will I make the decision once I have all of the information? Puts a little bit less of like your personal ego on the line, which I think makes it easier to make the right decision, and instead focuses on, the strength of learning and how to get the information that you need. It's like a reframing of how you're thinking that I've just recognized is so helpful to me. And running is still super core to me, no matter how busy I am. Even when I'm not running because I'm injured, running is still core to me. I've learned that I'm a better person when I make that time for myself. So you can still find me running any day that I'm not injured. Any day that I can, which is most days. If I'm not running, I'm probably doing yoga or lifting weights or doing something else that contributes to that sport and my identity in the sport. Because I've just learned that when I make that time for myself, I am able to show up for everyone else. And I think that's one of the biggest changes being in the role I'm in now as the CEO at Oiselle versus other roles that I've had in my career, is that so much of being an effective leader is not about what you need as the leader. It's about what everyone else needs of you. And I actually really like being in that space. It's really fulfilling for me and to me. However, to do it well, I know that I need to serve myself first. So running is still core. I was lucky to squeak in training to be able to run Boston the last 2 years while I've been there with Oiselle, and hope to be able to do the same thing this coming April.
That does bring us to the end of Arielle's story on the podcast, looking ahead to what comes next in her running career as she oversees Oiselle. I want to thank Arielle so much for coming on the podcast and sharing her story. I will also add that I have been a longtime fan of all things Oiselle, so it was an extra special treat for me to get to learn more about Arielle as an athlete and to hear about the process that she went through to become the CEO of Oiselle. Thank you so much, Arielle, for sharing your story, and I am so excited to continue to see what comes next for Oiselle under your leadership, and also what comes next for you as an athlete. So thank you. I know you, like me, will want to keep up with Arielle, so I will provide a link to how you can follow her online in the show notes. I will also link to Oiselle. And that does bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you once again so much for joining me. I will be back next week with a new episode. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I'm the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next week, I do wish you healthy, joyful, rewarding strides forward.
Women's running. Women's running stories.